everybody. Thanks so much for viewing our educational webinar today. We are talking about estate planning and using estate planning to protect your assets. A super important topic, in my opinion. So my name is Jennifer Ward, and I am one of your co-hosts. And a little bit about me, if this is your first time checking out one of our educational webinars. I live in Denver, but invest in Indianapolis, Indiana, as well as Terre Haute, Indiana. And we're currently looking to expand into short-term rentals, hopefully somewhere in Georgia. So that's a little bit about me. Been doing it for about 3 years now and started this community up, started out in Denver, and then we expanded it to the Facebook platform for anybody to join. And we also have my co-host, Raina.
Hi guys, Raina Baez. I also live in Denver. I invest in Memphis and Birmingham, so I'm also a long distance real estate investor. We primarily do the BRRRR method. I have flipped some homes, and this topic in particular, the estate planning for asset protection, I'm really, really excited about because I think, like me, a lot of you, the vast majority of us, I mean, the whole purpose of investing in real estate is to create wealth. And, you know, really long-term wealth that keeps on giving as we retire. And you want to make sure that all this hard work that you do to create your portfolio, whether it be like one house to like a gajillion homes, it isn't wasted when you pass. And so that's where our speaker, Pam Maass, comes in. So she's going to tell us today a little bit about how to estate plan in order to protect our assets and to perhaps prevent the craziness that can happen in courts and among family members after we pass. So Pam Maass, I'm super excited to introduce her actually. She's the founder of Law Mother, a law firm dedicated to helping families protect their children and assets while building legacy and creating wealth. She specializes in working moms. She's a working mom herself, although she happily serves all families. And she's won numerous awards for her work as an attorney. She's designated, I'm not gonna go on and on. Pam and I have actually know each other. We used to work together, and I know her through the legal community in Colorado, and she, I can honestly say, is an excellent attorney. She was awarded top 40 under 40 by the National Trial Lawyers Association. She's designated top lawyer by 5280 magazine. So I'm super excited for what she has to say. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Pam.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Raina. Thanks, Jennifer. And just let me know in the chat, you guys can hear me okay and see the slides. And really excited that you are all here watching the recording and that we have some of you here live that may be joining us. So we're going to be talking today about 5 levels of asset protection for real estate investments.
Pam,
you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh, there we go. The best way for you to get the most value out of our time together today is to really get rid of those distractions. And it's so hard to do, right, during this day and age with all of us being electronic, but you're really going to get the most value out of our time together today. So, and you ultimately, your family deserves this time, and you do, because this is really all going to be to serve them. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to be talking about, for Colorado residents, how you can receive a golden ticket worth $1,000 of estate planning if you stick around to the end. If you are not a Colorado resident, I will also talk to you about you and helping you at the end. So you're definitely going to want to stick around with us till the very end. A little disclaimer, we are going to be talking about legal education and not legal advice. What is the difference? Well, in order for it to be legal advice, you'd have to hire me. We'd have to have that attorney-client relationship, and I'd have to talk about your own specific situation. So this is the educational component. And then we're going to talk a little bit about taxes today. Nothing I'm telling you is about how you should break the law. So pay your taxes, but we're going to talk about how to legally minimize those taxes. And let me know in the chat for those who are live, and then you can also just, if you aren't here live, you can think this in your head, or you can interact with the group when this is posted. But let us know, do you currently have any estate plan or asset protection plan in place for your real estate investments? And then if you don't have something in place, don't feel bad. 69% of Americans have no estate plan in place. And That is why our court system is nice and busy. The probate court system is nice and busy. If you haven't put an estate plan in place, why not? It might be that you're too busy. It might be that you're afraid it's going to be too expensive, or you might feel like you're too young. We're going to talk about that. And if you do have something in place, what do you hope to learn today? And maybe you did something online and you want to know if that's going to cover you, or you thought about creating something online. Maybe you want to have a better understanding. Maybe something's outdated. We will cover all of that today. So what you're going to learn is we're going to talk about the 5 levels of asset protection for real estate investments. And the first level is really your insurance and estate planning. And then the 2nd through 5 level is we're going to talk about some different ways through limited liability entities and advanced asset protection you can also protect real estate. Before I jump into that, quick background about me and why I'm so passionate about estate planning. So I grew up in Arizona. My background's in engineering. I actually worked as an engineer for a company called CH2M Hill. Came out to Colorado, graduated with my law degree 11 years ago from the University of Colorado, and then started working as a deputy district attorney up in the 20th, and really became passionate about estate planning because I saw the unexpected happen to families, whether it was an accident or a crime. And then I saw what would happen in the probate court system in the other courtrooms in the building, and especially for minor children getting stuck in the foster care system. And then I went into litigation and worked in civil practice. And I have over 43 jury trials under my belt. I've gotten 2 multi-million-dollar verdicts for my clients, one 4.2 million and one 1.2 million. And we're going to talk about those because they both involve some real estate. So you're going to hear a little bit about that. And the reason I share that is because a lot of people on the estate planning side don't have the litigation experience. And so they don't actually see what happens down on that side. And so I really like to bring this litigation experience to help advise you, to help you keep your family out of court and conflict. And then the photo on the bottom is my husband and our daughter, Sophia, when she was born. And my why I'm so passionate about estate planning is my own family. When my grandma passed away, her estate plan failed. It was prepared by a firm in Arizona. And I really thought what the firm had done was commit malpractice, but it's actually a very common practice. And as a result, we were in court, in conflict. It caused a lot of strife in my family. And I really became passionate about making sure what happened to my family doesn't happen to others. So that is really why I'm so passionate about giving these presentations for that reason, so that you really understand how everything works. And then over the years, the work I've done in the community has been recognized, and that's been really great honor. So let's turn it over to you. Why are you here? And Raina kind of touched on this in the beginning. You know, you have assets that you're working so hard to grow for you and for the people that you care about. And so if something were to happen to you today, who would need your protection? So you can let me know in the chat if you're here live, if something were to happen to you. If you are watching the replay, go ahead and just write it on a piece of paper. If something were to happen to you, who would need your protection? And for me, it's my daughter, Sophia, and my husband and our 2 dogs. That's who we would need. So I see some responses in the chat. Thank you. So let's talk about asset protection basics. So when we talk about asset protection, one of the first kind of reactions is, why should I worry? I have insurance. But insurance doesn't cover everything. And you need to be mindful that claims get denied, that there are policy limits, and that sometimes there are exclusions and lapse policies. And what are we worried about when we're talking about asset protection? Well, there's a lot of lawsuits filed each year. And there's kind of 2 types of liability when we're doing asset protection planning that we're talking about. And the first is inside liability, so risks related to the real estate that you're investing in. So if you own real estate here in Colorado, right, you might be thinking about slips and falls from snow and ice, or if you have real estate somewhere in a cold weather state. But if you have it near other types of areas, you have other potential risks, right, based on the nature of it. And that's an inside liability. Outside liability is risk unrelated. So if you're in a car accident, can someone sue you and get access to your real estate portfolio? Or if one of those deals that you do as an investor with maybe your partners, If it goes south, can they get into your personal assets? Can they get into your other assets? So those are some of those risks that we talk about when we talk about asset protection. And then when we're talking about the real estate itself, besides slip and falls, what are some of the other risks? Well, these are some of the things that I've come across. Injuries to tenants, pools, failure to maintain, violation of laws, so inadequate security. There's probably other things that you've seen that you've come across, but this is just one of those lists. So before you start doing asset protection, it sometimes seems a little bit silly, like it's major overkill until you actually need it. And when you actually need it, it's too late because then it's called a fraudulent transfer. So when you get into asset protection, get used to hearing, why would you want to do that? Or you can't do that. It's really important to educate yourself. And that's what you're doing today, which is a good first step. So let's talk about fraudulent transfers. So when should you do asset protection? Well, now. And if you make any type of transfer of real estate or your other assets after a claim arises, then you could be in the situation of being accused of a fraudulent transfer. And really that timeline starts, that trigger, when there's a harm, not when there's a specific lawsuit, when you're on notice of harm. And fraudulent transfer is very, very bad because there are penalties, both financially, both there can be criminal in some states. There's a Uniform Trust Act, Uniform Fraud Transfer Act, and then there's specific states have their own. So I want to kind of give you two examples so that you really understand how this works. And the first example I have, where it's a car crash case where my client was on the back of the motorcycle. She was going through an intersection. They had the green light and a woman ran through a red light and crashed into her. And she was really badly hurt. She was a passenger on her brother's bike. She actually was one of these women who never went on motorcycles because she thought that they were unsafe, but it was like her brother's birthday and she decided to make an exception. She's a mom of three, and she really badly got hurt. So she had to have her leg amputated. So when the police came, the woman in the car said that she had the green light and my clients said that they had the green light. And so it was kind of this he said, she said situation. So within a week of this case, the woman who hit my client transferred her real estate here in Colorado. It was a home worth about $400,000. She quitclaimed the deed to her brother. And when we went into litigation, we went into when the client hired me, I was able to file a whole separate lawsuit because of that transfer, arguing that it was a fraudulent transfer, that she was trying to hide assets from my client. And it was before we had even filed the lawsuit. So that's where that timeline piece comes up. And because of that, I was able to argue increase in damages. I was able to freeze the property from being sold. So I was able to put a lien. And at trial, the jury got to hear the evidence of this transfer as a potential for consciousness of guilt. And so that was the case where I got an over $4 million verdict for my client. So that kind of illustrates, don't make those transfers. The second example I have is a case involving a medical doctor. And this medical doctor owned real estate, and then he owned the commercial real estate for his medical practice. And he was not the best doctor. He actually sexually assaulted his clients, and he sexually assaulted my client. And before we had even brought a suit against him, so she had made a claim to the medical board, he within a week had transferred all of his real estate and the commercial real estate to his wife. And so before we even filed the lawsuit, I found out about it earlier, and I was able to do what's called a prejudgment writ of attachment and essentially freeze all of his bank accounts and all of his real estate by arguing that he was making these transfers. And the judge agreed with us, and then we went into litigation. So those are kind of why you never want to ever transfer any type of asset after a claim arises, because the person can freeze all the rest of your assets. They can get increased damages against you. In some states, they can even bring criminal charges. And even very smart people do it because they don't really realize that it's an issue. So we talked a little bit in asset protection basics about real estate a moment ago, but real estate is considered a hot asset because it carries the potential for liability due to the nature of the asset itself. So this was the inside liability. And cold assets are your other assets, such as your brokerage accounts, but they don't carry any potential for liability by the nature of itself. So the general rule of thumb is your hot assets should be segregated from each other and from your cold assets to maximize that protection. And we are going to talk a little bit more about those types of entities here in a moment. So let's talk about this first layer of asset protection, which is insurance and estate planning. So when it comes to insurance, that is always going to be your first line of defense. Good insurance will cover the majority of your asset protection concerns. And I worked for a little while on the insurance defense side before I went on to the plaintiff side. And then I went on the plaintiff side. And the biggest issue I saw both when I worked for insurance companies and when I worked for plaintiffs directly was that insurance, people would go and purchase insurance online. They would get the cheapest rate and they wouldn't look at the type of insurance they actually bought. And they wouldn't understand the exclusions in their policy. So I even just came across this with insuring one of my real estate properties is kind of the default plan that the insurance advisor gave me, excluded slip and falls. It excluded a whole bunch of things that as a plaintiff's lawyer, I was really freaked out about. So you really want to work with a trusted advisor, someone that understands insurance, that understands real estate investing, that understands the potentials for risks. You want to think about what are the specific areas in your portfolio where there could be potential claims, and you want to get good insurance that's going to cover that. And normally it's not going to be that much more per month, but that's going to be the cheapest way for you to get the most coverage and the best protection for your family. I always talk about MedPay. So for real estate investments, especially if you're using it for rentals, even for short-term rentals, be sure to get a large MedPay policy if your state allows it. MedPay here in Colorado is where the insurance company will just, if someone gets injured, no matter whose fault it is, they'll just give a check to $10,000. So even if it's your fault or the other person's fault, they'll just pay the person out and cover their medical bills. And that will get rid of the majority of claims. And then if you own vehicles, underinsured motorist coverage and uninsured motorist coverage is the most important thing to get. If someone hits you that's underinsured or has no insurance, it's going to cover you, especially if you're in the real estate business and you aren't, looking at having disability insurance. And if you are, going to be, in a hospital or disabled for a long period of time, you really need to make sure that if you're in some type of accident that you're covered. So good insurance is going to be your first line of defense. Now let's talk about estate planning and asset protection planning. And when we talk about estate planning, I like to describe it as estate planning is a plan for life, not death, because you really get to enjoy the plan now while you're living. And it's also not just about protecting your assets for when you die. It's also for protecting your assets if you become incapacitated or disabled, which unfortunately for the majority of us at some point in our life that will happen. So what happens to your assets if you die or become disabled if you have no plan in place? Well, the default plan is going to be the government's plan, and that's going to be the state in which you live and also the state in which each state where you own real estate. And that plan you are not going to like because it's going to be expensive. And that's why I have the nice dollar signs going out. So the government plan is probate. And that's a court process that is best described as a lawsuit against yourself for the benefit of your creditors. It's lengthy. On average here in Colorado, it takes between 9 months and 2 years. It's pretty much a similar national average in most places. It's going to be public. So things are not going to be kept private, and it's going to be costly. And many people think that a will is enough to protect their family and their assets. And that's the number one misconception, because wills actually go through the probate process. Wills are really not enough because a will just contains instructions to a judge to follow. So your family's still going to have to pay that money, still going to take that time. So what is a living trust? Well, you can think of a living trust as a substitute for a will, and it avoids the probate process. So who is a good candidate for a living trust? If you own real estate, you should highly consider it. Here in Colorado, if you have an estate over 75,000, if you have minor children, if you own businesses, and if you have any type of special needs beneficiaries or are part of a blended family. Because a properly drafted and properly funded trust will avoid probate, so it will save your family that time and that money. So just to give you an idea of a cost of probate example, if you own a piece of real estate that's $500,000, you have a $300,000 IRA, and you have a $500,000 life insurance policy, and your children are minors and it's going to go through probate, that's a $1.3 million estate, which is going to cost here in Colorado about $65,000 out of their inheritance. Whereas if you put an estate plan in place, it's on average going to cost about $4,000 to $6,000. So instantly you're going to have that savings for your loved ones of about $59,000. But on top of that, you save them the time. The assets aren't being frozen. They're not being delayed. They're not having to go through a court process. You can also minimize estate taxes, capital gains taxes. There's other tax savings that you can put in place with a trust-based plan. And then there's the asset protection incentives that we're going to talk about. So why don't people put estate plans in place? Well, there are some common misconceptions. The first misconception I hear is you only need a plan if you have millions and millions of dollars. And it's really not about that. It's about how much input and control you want. And if you want that control of your body on your money. And if you don't have a plan, your default plan is the state that you live in. It's that state's plan for you, which you're not going to like. The other misconception I hear is my spouse will get everything anyway, but you still need a plan. Without one, if you become incapacitated or disabled, your loved one is still, your spouse is still going to have to go to court and pay expenses to get access. And at some point, you are both going to pass away. And a lot of people worry about the cost, but the default cost is going to cost way more, which is what we've talked about. Now, because this group does a lot of investing in out-of-state properties and in the state you live in and in other states, there is something you should be aware of. And if you pass away and that real estate is in your name, or if it's an LLC and you have no estate plan and you're the holder of that LLC, then you pass away, your loved ones are going to have to go through probate in every state that you own real estate. So if I own real estate here in Colorado and in Wyoming and Nevada, and I pass away, my loved ones are going to have to go through and open a court case in all three states. They're going to have to pay legal fees in all three states. They're going to have to wait the time. It's going to be double, triple, quadruple the cost and time. And this is even if you have limited liability entities in place. Now, one of the other big risks to your family is on your loved ones not knowing what you have and where it is when you pass away. And so here in Colorado, there's 516 million in unclaimed property. If you do a quick Google search of your own state, of your Department of Unclaimed Property, you'll find a great website where you can enter in your name. I love doing this with my clients because sometimes I go on the site and I find money that's just owed from them from like different utilities and different departments. So you'll see that they don't spend that much time looking for you. And, I'll go on there and find money for my clients all the time. But here in Colorado, it's 516 million. In California, it's 9 billion. And that's because if you think about it, if something were to happen to you today, would your family know all your bank account numbers, all your life insurance account numbers, all your retirement accounts? And where does that go if they can't find it all? It goes into this department, they put it on notice, and then no one ever receives it. So if you take away one thing from today, just get out a folder, a nice little folder like this, and put the first page of everything that you own in that and tell your loved ones where it is so that they know and just keep that updated. So we talked for a moment about some of the advantages of holding your real estate, whether it's an entity or in your individual name in a living trust, and your other assets in a living trust. And that's really saving the cost of probate, the time, and having your choices honored, and also the disability protection. And then now we're going to talk about the asset protection and wealth preservation. And this is really protecting the assets for your children from their future creditors, their future divorces, really protecting it for your heirs and minimizing estate taxes. So if you don't have a plan in place, your loved ones will, your children, if you have children, otherwise your heirs, if you don't, will just receive their distributions outright at 18. And there's some concerns, right? A lot of us, don't make the best decisions when we were 18. So receiving that type of inheritance can get lost very quickly. And on average here in the United States, people spend their inheritance within the first 2 years. It doesn't last. And then, there are concerns that your loved ones might get divorced in the future, or they may have future creditors. So you can, with a trust, put in lifetime asset protection for your children, and you really can customize it to their specific needs. So you can build in guidance to effectively manage and protect their inheritance, both for them, or if they're responsible enough, just to protect it from their future creditors and their future divorces. The biggest mistake I see from do-it-yourself estate planning on online websites is a lot of these websites have form documents that are drafted for a state that you don't live in, and so the laws don't apply. The other thing that I see is that it's one size fits all, so it's not custom, especially for people who have blended families. It doesn't cover those types of situations. But the biggest mistake I see is people will set up a trust and they don't transfer assets into the trust correctly. So they just wasted the money creating something that's never going to do anything. And that's mainly how I see these types of plans fail. It really is a difference between you get what you pay for. So as far as kind of title ownership and how you should take title to real estate for your real estate investments, or if you have clients that you work with, maybe you manage a portfolio for other people or you're a realtor. Well, when titling property and real estate correctly is important, because if it's titled incorrectly, the title owner cannot fix it after they died. If you title real estate incorrectly, your heirs can lose the property and they can end up paying capital gains. So some of the common ways that I see people owning title is either sole ownership, or if they're married, joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And the reason that joint tenancy for right of survivorship, the worst part about it is when the first person dies, they really have no control about what happens, and it will go through probate at the second death. So the benefits of assigning or holding real estate in a limited liability entity or a living trust: if you hold it in a limited liability entity, you have to assign the interest to a trust, or you can hold it in a living trust. But the benefit of doing that is it avoids costly, time-consuming, and public probate. The right people inherit, and you get the protection from capital gains and estate tax and protection for your heirs. So we're going to move on to the final few levels pretty quick here. That first level was kind of our more in-depth one. So the second layer was putting real property in a limited liability entity. And LLCs are really great for holding real estate because they can be single member or multi-member, but they don't require as much maintenance as a corporation. And, entities have a separate taxpayer from your taxpayer ID. In order to have that protection, you have to maintain the corporate formalities. You must keep your separate bank account and file tax returns. And if you commingle your personal expenses with your business expenses for your real estate, you could lose some of that liability protection. So when you have multiple pieces of real estate, the best practice is to put each real estate in its own LLC and separate it from each other. The reason that is the best practice is if someone goes after one of those assets, they can't get into the other asset. So the example that I give is I represented a client who was injured at a motel. The family owned 5 motels, but they owned it all in their individual name. So when we brought our lawsuit, we were able to go after all of the different entities at once. We were able to get discovery from it, get evidence from all of them, and really attach all those assets because they didn't have it separated. And then when we're talking about more advanced planning, one thing to consider is what state should you have your LLC in? And this is something you really want to work with a lawyer on. Some states have better protection than others. And so a lot of times when you own real estate in one state, you're going to want to at least have an entity in that state, but you might want to have a holding company in a different state that has better protections. But depending on which state, you really have to comply with those laws. So Wyoming, Delaware, and Nevada have been really popular, lately South Dakota as well, because they give different types of charging order protections. As far as charging order is, would a creditor be able to force you to sell the real estate or not? And then there's also other privacy advantages. And then kind of the fifth layer, which is an area that is really, really changing a lot. And it was, even as of last week, we were looking at maybe some potential changes, is holding assets in an asset protection trust or an irrevocable trust as a holding company. And those are typically for more of our higher net worth clients who are trying to minimize their exposure to estate taxes. But there are some other advantages for that. And you really, every once in a while I'll get a call from someone who watched some video and they want to open one of these $25,000 trusts. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back and kind of see what you have in place. And they don't have anything else in place. So it's not something that I recommend for anyone, but it's just something to let you know that is out there and why people use that strategy. So how much protection do you need for you and your family? Well, when you're talking about protection, the first thing you want to think about is timing and your state's fraudulent transfer act, which we've talked about. Each state has its own homestead exemption, which protects your residential, your primary residence. Here in Colorado, it's pretty low. It's $75,000. Other states, from folks that are listening, there's a lot of much higher protections. But you also have protections in most states around certain types of investments like life insurance policies, annuities, IRAs. So when I work with my clients, we're always talking about what are their protected assets and analyzing their exposure, and then what are their unprotected assets. And that's really going to govern how much asset protection you specifically need. So I'm going to kind of click through these here in a moment and just give you a quick background on our process in our firm. And for those of you who are in Colorado, we're always happy to chat and see if it's a good fit for both of us. If you're outside of Colorado and you're listening to this, this is just a good way for you to understand when you're shopping around for lawyers, kind of what the difference is. And I'm always happy to give you a referral to an attorney in a different state. I don't get referral fees, so Colorado doesn't allow that, but I'm always happy just to help people out. So my process that I work with clients is I do a family wealth planning session, a signing ceremony, and a final meeting. The whole process usually takes about 8 weeks, and we offer both virtual and in person. On average, my clients spend between $4,000 and $6,000, and I talked about how the average savings that I save my clients' heirs is over $70,000. So I know the biggest risk to your assets and your family is procrastination. Estate planning is one of those things that people tend to put off until it's too late. So because you've taken the time to get educated today, I really want to make it easy for you to get an estate plan in place. So if you are a Colorado resident and you are a member of this group and you've watched this, I have a $1,000 golden ticket for you. And that $1,000 golden ticket includes a complimentary family wealth planning session, which I normally charge $750 for. And that complimentary family wealth planning session is 2 hours of my time where I go through with you all of your assets, how things would currently transfer under Colorado law, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and I give you a full strategy. Now, there is one catch for me to waive that $750 fee, because there's always a catch, right? The one catch is we do ask you to complete some online homework ahead of time. The homework is to your advantage because I prep for your meeting for about an hour ahead of time. I review everything. I do calculations ahead of time. So I come to the meeting fully prepared and actually use that time as a working meeting and give you advice. It also is to your advantage because it gets everything organized in one space. And what do we talk about from the beginning? You need to have everything in one place if something were to happen to you. So you walk out of that meeting with a nice structured document that you can give your loved ones that says what you have and where it is. And we make it easy for you to do. It's an online link for you to enter in your information. It's similar to what you need for a mortgage loan, but it's a lot less. So kind of gives you some of the similar idea. And then there's no pressure to work with me, but if you do work with me, I take $250 off of your plan. So if you would like to get this golden ticket, you just have to let us know by 5 o'clock tomorrow. If you're watching the replay, it will be based on 5 o'clock the next day after you watched it. We'll just check in our system. And if you want to reserve this golden ticket, you can go to lawmother.com/go. And I'll also kind of put my contact information at the end here too. But essentially, when you go to lawmother.com/go, if you want to schedule a 15-minute consult because you have more questions, you can talk to Allie or Jorge on my team. This is only for Colorado residents. And if you're married, your spouse needs to attend the meeting. So you have to make it at a time that they can attend. If you're ready to schedule that family wealth planning session, you can choose in office or virtual and just go straight to that website. When you go to that website, you'll have to write in your information, and then we do reserve with a credit card. We don't charge your credit card anything. Like when you book for a spa or doctor's appointment, because it's 2 hours of my time and I only take a few appointments per month, it's a really big burden on us for last minute cancellation. So that's our policy. We won't charge you as long as you cancel 24 hours in advance. We'll charge you $250 if you're a no-show or you don't cancel within 24 hours. So if you have questions about that, you can always call our office and we could talk about it. And then when you get on that website, it allows you to directly schedule on my calendar. If you're looking on my calendar and you don't see something that works for you, just give our office a call. We do hold other appointments open. So we can do later appointments or earlier appointments. So if you're looking and you don't see something, just give our office a call. And so, yep, to schedule your family wealth planning session and claim your golden ticket, you can go to that website or you can email info@lawmother.com by 5 p.m. tomorrow, and we'll reserve that for you. Once you're scheduled, you will receive your confirmation email, which will have the pre-meeting package. And if you need a referral for an attorney in your state, feel free to shoot an email to info@lawmother.com. Let them know that you watched this and what state you're in, and we'll give you our list of people that we have. So really appreciate everyone taking the time to watch live and to watch the replay. I'm always here as a resource, so I'm available for a complimentary 15-minute call. As I mentioned, the golden ticket. And we also have some free online legal tools on our website. So you can name legal guardians for your kids on our website. And there's a free tool. And that's our contact information. If you have questions, let us know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pam. This was great. It was a really concise and pretty easy to understand layout and explanation, in my opinion, though I've been going through probate for my late father. So, all of this is very familiar to me, but I do realize, like, for those of us who haven't had to go through that experience, the unfortunate experience, a lot of it can go over our head and we just don't realize the severity of it all. I mentioned in the chat that for me and my family, my husband and I, we went ahead and initiated the start of a trust. And I just wanted to share my personal story of why, because what I just mentioned, my late father, we've been going through the probate process for him. He died unexpectedly in a plane crash. He was the pilot. He was 72 years old, but my God, I think he could have lived to 100. He was a really healthy, active, he was still flying, obviously, at 72. He unfortunately was not the most organized. I had no idea about anything he might have had. My parents were divorced. So luckily, though, I was able to kind of talk to my mom about who they used when they were married to create a will. So I had to do a lot of detective work. So, I had to go find the attorney who helped them with the will. And then, we had no idea about, what bank accounts he might have had. We had no idea about, other than maybe some real estate assets that we were aware of, just everything else that could be out there. So it was a wild goose chase. And it took a good year to really capture everything that he had going on in his life. And, it's 3 years now. November 17th will be 3 years when he died. It'll be in January, I guess it'll be 3 years when we officially started the probate process, and we're still going. We are at the tail end of things, but it just goes to show like how long probate can be, and just the amount of detective work you have to do. Not to mention with probate, it can cause a lot of tension if there's multiple beneficiaries. And yes, a judge does have to sign off on all the big decisions. So I can't stress to people enough on how important it is to start your estate planning today, like Pam said, before anything is happening. Because if something happens, then you could be charged with fraud for transferring any assets into like an LLC or another person's name. But I mean, I just can't, just my personal experience, and there's really not a whole lot of information out there for people going through probate and how, steps to follow. Like I tried to do searches and there's not a lot of information out there to help people. But the best thing to do is create something like a trust, lay it all out. And that is like the best gift you can give to anybody when the unexpected or the formidable expected happens. So this presentation is just like really so crucial, I think, for everybody who, especially people involved in real estate investing, anybody really, but for us who have those hot assets, this is a crucial thing. So hopefully this gets the message across to anybody who views it to start taking action today at the very least. Just do something small. I do have one question, like when we have viewers who aren't in Colorado, what do you recommend? I know you can offer some referrals, but do you have any recommendations on how they can find an estate planning attorney? Maybe any questions to see if a particular attorney is qualified to help them with estate planning or so forth?
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you. That's a great question. And thanks for sharing your story. I know that from kind of what you've described, it's very painful and it's very vulnerable to share with everyone. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to talk to people about it, because I think a lot of times people don't, and then other people suffer. So that's a really good gift for you to share that with us. So personalfamilylawyer.com is a good resource. There are other attorneys. I'm part of that group. There are other attorneys in that network. We all practice really similar. We have a lot of us have had the same experience where our loved ones have gone to an attorney and the plan had failed. And so we all practice very differently because of that. And so personalfamilylawyer.com, they have estate planners in every state. But I'm also happy if there's multiple listed there to, if you want to shoot me an email to let you know if I've had an experience with one of them. On my website, there's a free report about shopping around for estate planners and what you should look for. And you're more than welcome to go to lawmother.com and download that report. To summarize it, essentially looking at, are they going to look at the holistic piece, or are they just trying to give you form documents? So it gives you some quick and easy ways to ask specific questions to find someone that's really going to be a trusted advisor for you and your loved ones, and that is really going to look at kind of the long-term needs of what you need.
That's great. Yeah, we a while back signed up with one of these, I guess, relatively known law firms, business advisors that offers nationwide legal advice and consulting. And hindsight, I wish we had found someone like you, local maybe to our area and more personable, because yeah, the experience was very just generalized. And I think you're right on that, like, holistic view. Like, I feel like they could have asked us 20 more questions to get a much clearer understanding of, what kind of operation we have today and where we see ourselves in the future. So I would probably encourage people, to use the resource that Pam mentioned, personalfamilylawyer.com, and call around a few, because it's a very personal subject. You have to be kind of vulnerable in the process, and you're asking yourself and like your spouse or whoever's involved, like, some tough questions. And so I think finding an attorney that you feel very comfortable with and confident with is so crucial in that process. So, yeah, and I also wanted to make note. So I should have written down my questions, but so part of, once you make the trust, so we just created it, and we went and got it notarized. So what would you suggest? What happens after that, after it's all signed? Where does the trust stay? Or is there, other than notifying maybe your close loved ones of where it might be, is there another resource you want to record or notify someone about your trust and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jennifer. So it's kind of set out by specific state. The majority of states don't have you actually record your trust because it is a private document. There are some states, Colorado is not one of them, but there are some states like Virginia that do want you to record your medical POAs and other types of documents. Some will also have you record your will. So the most important thing is to be sure that the original is in a waterproof / fireproof thing. So you can have it in one of, like, Amazon has some really good bags. You can put it in a fireproof, waterproof safe. You can put it at a safety deposit box in your bank. The next thing you want to do is make sure the people that you've named as trustees, the people you've named in your plan, they know where the original is, and give them digital copies if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable giving them digital copies, at least let them know where they can get the copies if something were to happen to you. You want to make sure that you transfer all of your assets into the trust. So you want to be sure that that's taken care of so that it's actually going to kind of work for you. That's kind of the main pieces, I would say. We do comprehensive kids protection planning. So if you have minor children, we do both short-term guardians, long-term guardians. We do like an emergency wallet ID card. So I always tell my clients to be sure that the people you've named have copies, so that in an emergency, they could share that with the police and take temporary guardianship of your kids instead of your kids going into foster care or child protective services. But really just having that communication and then letting the people know where you're going to keep the updates is very important. So, I have this file and this is where everything's going to be kept updated, and something happens to me, this is where it's located, and letting the backup people know. I just had a call from actually a friend of mine in a different state, and her father was an alcoholic, is an alcoholic. Her grandfather disinherited him and gave everything to her. And he passed away, and no one can find the original will. And so she's already consulted with attorneys in that state, and everything's going to go to the alcoholic father. Because the original will isn't found, it's as if the will doesn't exist. And so then it passes pursuant to that state's laws. And so it's going to go completely against the wishes. So I would say, especially in situations where someone's being disinherited, or there's potential for something that's against what the state law is, that's when the original is very, very critical and won't serve its purpose. So, but even in cases where you're not, it's very important that the original is maintained somewhere safe.
Yeah. Yes, we're still in the process of transferring all of our assets, the title, changing the name to the on the title. So yeah, there's multiple steps, and it's all so crucial because yeah, right now our trust doesn't mean anything until some of that is already transferred. Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to post in the comments or unmute yourself and ask questions as well. We have just a few more minutes for Pam. Okay.
I guess I do have a question. It's kind of specific to the trust. So the court will only go by the original document, even if you send copies of the document to numerous people and they all match. The court will only abide by the original trust.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
because there can be modifications that are made down the road, right? So you can always update and amend. And so if there's any type of dispute or any type of dynamics, they'll always go based on the original.
Good question.
Well, I have to say that there were numerous points during your presentation where I had that feeling in my stomach where I was like, oh my God, I need to handle my stuff better. What I didn't realize is, my husband and I own these properties together, but because of tax purposes, he actually owns them in an LLC that's solely owned by him. And if he passes, if I have to go to court to fight for my right to somehow own these, or I don't even know. That would be just so much money and so much headache and hassle when I'm already dealing with a really sad loss. So it has really motivated me. I'm going to sign up for the golden ticket. I think it has to happen and I got to do it now. So thank you for that. I needed that.
Yeah, I will be that kick in your rear until it happens.
I think nobody else has any questions. We're gonna close up shop, but really thank you so much, Pam, for this amazing information and for giving us that kick in the butt that I very much needed. You can find us on Long Distance Real Estate Investor Facebook page. There's also going to be a link to the YouTube, and it's under the same YouTube name. Is that right, Jen?
Yeah, Long Distance Real Estate Investors channel on YouTube. So please subscribe to the channel and you'll be alerted as soon as any recordings of our educational webinars are posted. And then, yeah, like Raina, you mentioned, always can find updates on our Long Distance Real Estate Investors group.
So I recommend listening to this and then re-listening to it, because I bet that there's little carrots in there that we'll catch the second time around. But thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both.